Good morning and welcome to 2021. Good to see the back of 2020, yeah? Now, who has made New Year's resolutions? Show of hands. I have some uncomfortable news for you. Studies show that only 25% of us, so 1 in 4, will stay committed to our resolutions to the end of the month. Only 8% of us will actually achieve them. There are two big reasons that we don't stick to our resolutions. Number one, we set goals that are unreasonable. Number two, we don't have a coach or someone to model the life changes for us. Now, I want you to remember this because I'm going to try to help us to make some new resolutions later on. Some of you can probably guess where I'm going to go with this, but those two reasons, again, are, so we set goals that are unreasonable, and number two, we don't have a coach, someone to model the life changes for us. Have you got them in your head? Okay, good. Now, a little quiz, just to get the mental juices flowing. Who can tell me what this means? If you saw this on a poster, what would this be advertising, do you think? A new James Bond movie, that's right. Now, what about this? If you saw this, you'd be pretty confident that what you were about to see was going to be chock full of superheroes doing superheroic stuff, right? Okay, last one. Now this is Star Wars. Anything with this at the beginning is going to be a Star Wars story, right? Whether it's on animated, live action, TV, cinemas, that's what that phrase means, Star Wars. Now we know this because it's part of our culture, just part of the world that we live in. They're familiar tropes. Well, in the Roman world, in the first centuries of the current era, the time when John is writing his gospel, Greek philosophy was a big part of the culture, particularly Stoicism. And in Stoicism, there's this thing called the Logos. Logos is where we get the word logic from, when we talk about reason and purpose. It's where we get the ologies, like biology, the logic of living things, the climatology, the logic of climate. And for the Greek philosophers, the Logos was the structuring principle of reality, the logic or reason for everything. Now, why am I banging on about the Logos? Because this word that we have at the beginning of John's Gospel is Logos. In the beginning was the Logos. What John is doing here is taking a familiar trope in his time and place, the Logos, the force that structures reality, and he's saying, this is God. Anyone who read it back then, anyone who heard it, would have leapt to that connection. John's saying this is going to be a story about the reason for the universe. In the beginning was the reason, and the reason was with God, and the reason was God. John's saying, strap in folks, we're about to learn the meaning of life. But wait, John goes and throws in a twist right here at the beginning of the story. John goes and tells us that the Word became flesh. The reason, the purpose, the structuring principle of reality became flesh and dwelt among us. Now, if I'm a Roman, this is a twist that's more unexpected, probably more controversial, to be honest, than the revelation that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's dad in The Empire Strikes Back. And by the way, if you haven't seen Empire, sorry for the spoilers, but it's a 40-year-old movie. The Logos became flesh. Right there, verse 14, mind blown. Jesus is not just the reason for the season, but the reason for life, universe, and everything. He's a person, someone we can emulate, who we can look to as a model of what the universe could be, what our life could be. Someone who can coach us. See, I told you to remember those two big reasons why resolutions failed. One of them was that we didn't have someone to model what the change of life looks like. Well, here we are, in the Logos, the Word in action, in flesh, to model the life we could lead. And the other reason resolutions fail? Setting unreasonable goals. Now, Jesus is the embodiment of the structuring reason of the universe. Is there anything that could be more reasonable? Now, don't get me wrong, there's thousands of different people out there spruiking their own take on what is the underlying structure to everything. Capitalism will tell you that the economy is that structure. Communism will tell you it's class struggle. Advertising will tell you that it's fear of missing out or that sex sells. Many politicians also go with fear. Fear of the other, fear of the refugee, fear of China, their opposing party. Actually, fear is a pretty big one that comes up the most. But John's telling us that it's Jesus that's underlying everything. If we can line up our resolutions to what we see in the life of Jesus, we should find it a bit easier to follow through on our resolutions. Again, I'm not saying it'll be a cakewalk. As we flow on down the river of time that is 2021, there's still going to be rapids to negotiate, crocs or COVID to dodge, rocks to avoid. But if we try to line ourselves up with the Logos, the Word, the reason, at least we won't be trying to swim upstream. So how do we do that? Well, remember that this passage we have before us this morning is just the introduction to John's book. There's another 20 chapters that come after this, full of stories of how the structuring principle of reality made flesh went about living his life. Now, it's a cliche, but what would Jesus do is a pretty valid place to start. I wouldn't recommend upsetting the religious and political elite enough that they arrange to kill you off, but if that happens, just go with it. I'm suggesting that we start a bit simpler, okay? There's a story in John's Gospel that encapsulates it all, in my opinion. Now, in your own time, go and take a look at the story of the Samaritan woman in chapter 4. It's a good story, worth a read, and worth spending a bit of time with friends trying to unpack it. Or you can Google the Beatitudes. They're in Matthew and Luke's Gospels. Lots of stuff there. They all seem to lead to one theme, though, one underlying principle of the universe. And here it is. This is the lesson of the incarnation, the Logos becoming flesh. That all of us were once outcasts, broken yet loved, and worth reaching out to and redeeming. Understanding people's stories and struggles requires much more time and effort than condemning them, but it's vastly more rewarding. If God did that for us, if the underlying reason for the universe became flesh, to do that for us, can we make a New Year's resolution to try and do it for each other? Can we resolve to spend just a little more time each week getting to know someone who is outcast? Or to take the time to sit with someone who we know who is hurting? Or to forgive a little bit more than we already do? To love just a little bit more? It's a revolutionary thought even now. So I'll leave the answer of whether it's reasonable, whether it's doable, with Jesus as a model, up to you.